What's up, YouTubers? Me, Johnny, still in Mexico City, making a short video before I leave. Anyhow, I'm making a short video on the high cost of offshore providers. By that I mean like the offshore providers, like say for example, say for example the providers for not rebel capitalist, nomad capitalist, and like for example, I don't know all his fees, but my understanding is I think his minimum fee is $160,000. And one of his competitors, I can't think of his name, but he's a really cool dude. Lives primarily, I want to say no, he doesn't live in Dominica. He lives in St. Kitts. I forget the name of the gentleman. He's an older gentleman. He used to be a pro tennis star. He has a lot of videos on how things work in the offshore world. His fees, minimum fees, are, like, if I remember right, $30,000. By that I mean $30,000 for his advice. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just pointing out it's very expensive. So if you want to start up like an offshore brokerage account or bank account, the minimum fee is like $30,000. Also, too, I understand they're marketing to the wealthier people, but I think nomad capitalist, I'm not sure, but his fees might be some of the higher ones, but I could be wrong. But he has a wealth of information that's really, really impressive. Also, too, the guy in St. Kitts and I think it's St. Kitts. So I just want to make clear I'm not really bad-mouthing or anything. They have really great information. In fact, the guy in St. Kitts, I believe his understanding of Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, Latin America, it's really, really extensive and really knowledgeable. He actually knows kind of the loopholes, like in places like Guatemala, that no one really talks about. Like he's had quite a few videos that Guatemala is one of the few places in Latin America that's a tax haven that people don't really know about, and kind of the loopholes there. I'd also say nomad capital, same thing, but more in Asia and Eastern Europe. You can kind of tell he knows what he's talking about. He hires researchers to do a lot of his legwork, and what goes with that is the high fees. And for lower middle class people, or even just middle class people with $100,000 to maybe $1 million, the fees can be a little off-putting, because then you're gonna have to pay the fee, and then you have to pay the fee. Like if you're going to get an offshore passport, you're going to do the white glove approach, like in St. Kitts or Dominica. You're looking at I think like 150, 160,000 now. I might be a little off on St. Kitts, or maybe that's Dominica. I can't remember, but you're talking like under $250,000. So you're looking at fees and expenses upwards of $250,000, plus the fee to pay to these guys to get their advice. Now, if I'm wrong, leave it in the comments, but for average middle class people, that's going to be a steep hurdle to getting advice from those guys, and I don't really have a solution to that, because I don't really know really good offshore providers who cost a lot less. Well, actually I do. I actually know a few, but they specialize more in Latin America. But the costs to do things that way are so high now. I would say it's out of the budget of a lot of your middle class people. In fact, when you're on Twitter, or I'm mostly on Twitter and Facebook, but well, not really on Facebook much, but Twitter for the financial stuff, and Twitter for a lot of the offshore information. Anyhow, I'm here at kind of one of the malls. So far, they haven't asked me to turn off the video. It's one reason why I hold the camera up this way, because if you do it the other way and it's so obvious you're making a video, they'll usually ask you to turn it off. Anyways, we'll see what happens. Anyways, I haven't really seen a solution. I don't think there really is one, because once you start getting out there and you're learning all the fees for everything and all the complications and all the hate you're gonna get, you realize you could start a product or service for like $1,000 to $2,500 or things like that. But what you come out with eventually is realizing, because if you haven't really built up a trust online with a lot of people, it's really hard to get them to part with that kind of, even a couple $1,000. And once you realize what the fees are for a lot of stuff, like for setting up an offshore corporation, like in Central America or South America or even in Asia. I want to comment a little bit about Malaysia and the Philippines, but I won't in this video. But there's a lot of kind of interesting things going on in Malaysia as far as banking and brokerage and places like that. But so far, I haven't really found a solution except for really nowadays, for the average person, they have to do all the research themselves, be their own research. In other words, go to these places, set up a residency as best they can. And usually for average people, that's going to be either a retiree visa or some kind of permanent resident or temporary residency that leads to a permanent resident, or it'll be like some kind of student visa. Like, people scoff when I say that, but like, for example, in Peru, I know 3 people, a student, kind of an entrepreneur business guy, and just another dude, just average dude. They all got permanent residency starting out with a student visa. Even the entrepreneur, because when you figure out all the fees and all the ins and outs of certain things, it's actually just cheaper just to become a student, or if you can, through a retiree visa. But sometimes a lot of the not all, but some retiree visas won't lead to they'll lead to a residency, but they won't lead to like a passport or anything. Not always, just something, so you have to really check that out. But so if you get a visa that way, or if you get a visa like Brazil and Mexico, very famous for their, like, if you have a child there, you automatically qualify to become a permanent resident. And then in Brazil, after about a year, you get a passport if you want. I think in Mexico it's like 2 years. I might be wrong. And then the other thing is, there's more places like that than what people realize. You'll hear it all over Twitterverse. Only Mexico and Brazil are like that, but really, actually, there's quite a few other countries like that. So if you're single, you can get a visa that way. I don't really recommend it unless you really want to be married. So as I make videos about kind of the offshore world, getting residency and all that kind of thing, starting over in another country, you realize there's not really a lot of options for people kind of in the middle class. And there's really no product or service I've really come across that I could highly recommend to people as far as setting up bank accounts. That's really getting hard to do now. Getting a temp or permanent residency, that's getting more and more difficult. Some of the places where it's still kind of reasonable is like Mexico, Paraguay. You can get a permanent residence there very easy. Brazil, that's another one. I just have reservations about trying to learn another language in Brazil, else I would highly recommend Brazil. But Brazil's kind of like the United States. There's all kinds of visa options for almost anyone, from a student to a retiree to someone just starting a business. In my experience, from what I've seen, it's getting more and more difficult. Well, maybe not difficult, it's getting to be more and more expensive and cost prohibitive to start a business visa in a lot of countries. It used to be kind of cheap and not many people did it, but now as more and more people do it, the fees associated with the lawyers are rising and getting higher, and the requirements you got to meet as far as employees and filling out paperwork and paying taxes getting to be more and more burdensome, kind of like the US or Canada. That's why I personally wouldn't do it. That's why places like Panama are so popular. If you start a business there and employ people, you can get a business visa. But the trouble there is Panama doesn't always lead to a passport. I've pointed that out into my videos before, where a lot of Americans are unhappy because they go to let's say Uruguay, start a business there, and they have problems with regulation, even though it's very tax friendly, where it can be, or like I've just dropped it. But there's all these places where if you're actually going to run a business, you might be able to start it easy, but running it's going to be a pain in the neck. And then there's places like Panama where running a business aren't really a pain in the neck like Uruguay, but the regulatory compliance and the taxes you got to pay there, just to have a permanent reset. For some people, it may be worth it. For others, it may not. I think it comes down to what kind of a quality of life you want to have and kind of where you actually want to live. I haven't been to Uruguay, but from everything I've seen from some of the recent YouTubers kind of promoting the place, it looks pretty good, especially for people who have a diversified income stream, like if you have dividends or you have capital or income coming offshore, so it won't be taxed that way or taxed very lightly. But nowadays, more and more people suggest or recommend you pay taxes somewhere, so you're on someone's radar, so you're not totally invisible, unless that's what you want. Anyways, kind of got off the subject there, but this is my point. Like, it's getting more and more difficult to get us like a residency set up. I want to talk about kind of Malaysia and the Philippines, but I won't in this video. I actually might be getting out there and I'll make a video about some of the interesting things that very few people know about as far as offshore banking, having assets that are more or less invisible. These things aren't really a secret in Latin America, but in Asia, I see kind of a lot of misleading information. But anyhow, that's beyond the scope of this video. But I feel like there's a lot more to be said about average middle-class Americans and Canadians moving to other countries. And so far, I haven't found a product from someone out there in the offshore world where it's not prohibitively expensive to get personal advice, whether it's tax advice or advice on residencies and where to go, how to set up. It's getting more and more difficult just to set up a simple bank account. And the fees just to set up a bank account can be a couple $1,000s to like paying a professional like in the Caribbean like $20,000 or $30,000 just to get an idea where to put up. So if that's all you're going to do, you're probably not going to like hire consultants like that unless you're going to like take it to the next level and get you can afford to pay the fees to get a passport in the Caribbean or something like that. Anyways, I'm just putting my thoughts out there. I'm just basically looking for information. If anyone has found any service providers, like maybe in the $5,000 or $10,000 range or less, just to open simple brokerage and or banking, or if you found a consultant that specializes in a region or a country where their fees are fairly modest to set up a residency or a bank account or brokerage account or things like that. Because if you do know of people like that and people you trust and done business with, leave a link in the comments or whatever comment you want on where I might be mistaken or I might look to find something interesting. Anyways, that's it for now. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks.